Dregs, why don't we start with that, the injury stuff. We had you in studio last week. You and CJ were in there. We were talking about the Leafs and their injury problems and Auston Matthews in particular, and still no word on if he'll even play tomorrow night. What do you make of that from Craig Berube and where this goes if he doesn't play tomorrow?
Well, it goes to Friday on TSN when, the Leafs obviously play the Washington Capitals. I think what the Maple Leafs are saying at this point, and what Berube said after their practice today, was that they're not ruling him out for tomorrow, for Wednesday's game. So, I guess they'll decide after the morning skate. It sounds like Matthew Knies is closer. He seems likely to go. But I think it's the bigger picture issue, right? You think of Anthony Stolarz was expected to miss a game or two, and this guy hasn't been on the ice for an extended window of time here. So, look, it's an individual club thing. You don't have to disclose information. You don't have to disclose timeline. But I don't think that Craig Berube meets the media and then just randomly gives misinformation. He's dealing essentially day by day with the information that he has. He doesn't want to push Knies because this is something that he's been working with and dealing with since training camp. And, Auston Matthews, we know when he got hurt, and they need him to be as close to 100% healthy as he can be.
Well, Pierre, where do you stand on, I see you're in your Cowboys gear there, and you know the way the NFL has operated for a long time. Transparency, got to tell people, got to let fans know what's going on. The NHL isn't there. I don't know if they ever will get there. Where do you stand on that? And do you think it's possible at some point the commissioner could be tipped and said, you got to give more transparency here?
Yeah, to your point, I just read this afternoon that George Pickens will be playing Thursday for America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Yes. Transparency, George Pickens, missed a few plays because of a leg injury on Sunday. No, it's bugged me for a long time too. I think it's a very relevant conversation. In particular, the NHL has deals with legalized gambling companies, and I think there should be more detail and more transparency in the way injuries are talked about in the NHL. And by the way, it's interesting because Dregs knows this, but at the last GM meetings here in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, one of the real interesting presentations, or at least GMs were telling us they thought it was really interesting, was from the NHL security director, Jared Maples, who talked to GMs about being careful about who they share injury news with, etc. And that conversation was in the scope of all of the stuff that you're seeing in other sports with some of the, some of the gambling controversies and investigations, etc. So my point is, it's probably more paramount than ever, I think, for this type of information when coming from teams to be as transparent as possible for all kinds of reasons.
Well, Dregs, I think there's some frustration in the fan base in Toronto here because they need some of these guys back. Their season is, like Hayes was talking about, the mathematics that need to go down for the Leafs to get into the playoffs moving forward. And if they don't get it together in the next 2 weeks or so, it could be game over for these guys if they don't get some of these bodies back and start playing better.
Yeah, the playing better part should be amplified because, with all due respect to Knies and the Matthews and the Stolarz and go down the list, it's not like these guys were at the top of their game before injury. There were moments where individually they were playing well, but the moments where the team was coming together collectively have been fewer and fewer. But look, if it was as easy as Brad Treliving, identifying, okay, well, here's player X out there that I think is going to help us, he would do that. He'd find a way to do that. But now we're talking about the reality of all these other teams, Vancouver being the most vocal in that process, but it's difficult to find the right help. So back to Toronto and Matthews, if Matthews is back in the lineup on Wednesday or if he's back in on TSN on Friday, he's got to find a way to deliver every single game. And likewise for the rest of the group, because the next man up routine in Toronto hasn't worked. It hasn't worked at all. It hasn't worked since game one.
Well, it's the reality of the league that, trades, they don't seemingly happen much. Now, there are apparently are teams open for business. We'll get to that in a moment. I'm sure, Noodles, you're about to jump in on that.
Yeah.
But what usually happens then is GMs come out and say, the only thing I can do is change the coach. It's the only thing I can do. Dregs, do you get the impression that's even on the radar for Brad Treliving right now?
I don't. Not even on the radar. Now, I guess things can change relatively quickly, but nor am I saying that there shouldn't be an element of responsibility on the head coach or the coaching staff. I mean, that's what Craig Berube would expect, but not at the expense of his job, meaning that he feels that he still has time and the coaching staff in general have time to do a better job. Inspire this team to play better because the words aren't working, right? The message sending hasn't worked to this point, but look, if there's finger pointing happening, then everybody deserves a mirror in their said office, including the general manager and those above who decided that the only changes that were required were to get rid of Brendan Shanahan. Everybody is responsible in some way, shape, or form. I don't think this should all hang on Craig Berube, and I don't get the sense that management feels that way either.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody has to own some of it. That's just, and I don't mind that because everybody's got to be a little bit better if Toronto's going to dig out of this.